Thank you so much for joining us today. Everything is data in the last 12 months, and it promises to only get bigger in the next 12 months. So we're going to start with Dayle, just a recent change of role. What does a day in the life of a Chief Data Officer look like at a large energy company?
So it is a new role and it's a kind of a new team, but like Johan said in his opening address, it's about how do we become better than the sum of our parts. So we've had these amazing pockets of excellence that are doing amazing things with data and have done for years, and our opportunity now is to try to work out how to bring all of that together and be better than the sum of those parts. So the way we're thinking is that we have our data engineering, which is moving the data around, the availability and scalability and quality of data, getting it to the right place and right time. We have our data scientists that are then, looking for the opportunities in that data, the insights and what we can do with it. We have our data governance that's about, ensuring the security and privacy and that we meet regulatory compliance and that we're really looking after that data. And then we have kind of a translator type role that kind of brings all of that together and talks to our business across AGL about what opportunities are there. And then the last part is trying to get an entire organisation to be a bit more data minded. So there's a lot of engineers at AGL, so they like to think about how things work, so that's a really good start, but getting them to think about how they could use data and analytics to solve their problems is our other big opportunity. But so that sounds great, like we've got it all organised, but really it's quite new and we're really building this big capability, building an academy and recruiting. So come and see us and talk to us, everyone, about joining AGL and our data and analytics team.
Fantastic, thank you. Kirk, Vertiv's a $4 billion US firm with almost 20,000 employees worldwide. What are some of the data use cases that drive the Vertiv business in critical infrastructure?
Yeah, no, thanks, Andrew. So just before I respond to that, a lot of people may not know who Vertiv is. We did rebrand recently. Previously, we were Emerson Network Power, and some of our brands were Liebert, NetSure, Avocent, and Chloride Power Systems. We're a provider of equipment and services to the data centre space. So definitely we're seeing a lot of data use cases today. Probably the biggest case is just cloud. And speaking from a company who has been in the data centre space for a long time, we've seen whole rooms disappear because all the loads that used to be on-prem have now gone into the cloud or into co-location. But if we sort of have a look deeper at some of the use cases for the edge, and the edge and network is something that we're seeing a lot of growth in at the moment. We looked at 100 use cases in a global survey recently, and we classified those 100 use cases into 4 different classifications. And one of them for the edge was data-intensive applications. So this is where you're generating so much data, or you're consuming so much data, it doesn't make sense to move it to the cloud. You need to have processing and storage at the edge. Another use case classification was human latency sensitive applications. So this is where this is where technology is interacting with humans. So it might be something like website optimization. If the website's not working fast enough for you, the customer moves on to the next one, and someone loses the business. And another example of that is natural language processing. Thirdly, machine-to-machine latency sensitive applications like a smart factory or an automated warehouse. And finally, life-critical applications. And a good example of life-critical applications are smart transport. Autonomous cars are coming, smart transport's coming. You need it to work, and you need to have the IT infrastructure and the critical infrastructure designed to make sure it doesn't fail and put us all at risk.
Thank you. Trisca, institutional banking, big clients, domestic and international. What does the marketing function look like in that sort of environment, and how much of it is digital?
Thanks, Andrew. Well, I'm really excited to be here because I realise I'm amongst some incredible IT people and I'm the black sheep here. I'm here to talk about marketing, which is more about the front end rather than the back end. So in institutional marketing, our clients are think about them as the Fortune Global 500, the ASX 100, these are the CFOs, the CEOs. So traditionally our engagement with these people have been very analogue, but that's changing. And when you look at what are the levers that marketing can use in an organisation like an institutional bank, there are three key levers that you want to use marketing for. You want to use marketing to help build deeper relationship with your customers. You want to use marketing to help shift the reputation that your organisation has in the marketplace. And you want to use marketing to help drive revenue for the business. So what's really interesting is you're seeing how in a business-to-business marketing space, the behaviour of our customers, these people who are running large organisations around the world, are increasingly moving to digital spaces to find their information. So we know that Gartner has done many studies over the years that have shown that over 80% of people who are actually purchasing business-to-business goods, they're doing that through research, typically on the internet. And they're not doing it just at the initial stage of investigation, they're doing it throughout their life cycle. So what we did within institutional to understand, well, what is the role that we want marketing to play and where can we engage more deeply with our customers, is we did an extensive research into our consumers, our customers' path to purchase, their journey in that purchase. And through that, we gained some really important insights into the different stages that our customers take and what information and what role marketing can play at those different stages. And what became really evident is the role that content now plays for marketing. So if you think about, what you would experience as consumers, you would experience marketing as putting ads on TVs or billboards or radio. That is very intrusive. You probably shy away from it. You probably switch it off or move channels. What is engaging marketing is actually serving up content that's relevant to you at a time that you need it. And we've seen in the B2B space, business-to-business marketing space, that is absolutely true, if not leading the way for marketers. So the latest research into this area has actually shown that for business-to-business marketers, dynamic content is the biggest tech enablement investment they're going to make over the next 12 months. So we're no different. But you've got all this wonderful content, it's highly personalised, we serve it up at a time and a place that suits you. But there's a saying that I have, and that is that all roads lead to Rome. And in marketing, Rome is our website. So all that content that we're creating has to live somewhere, and for us, that lives on the website. So no matter where we're pushing the content, what type of content we have, whether it be voice, video, text-based, design, all of that has to eventually come back to the website, and that gives us enormous power to actually look and track people's behaviours, the levels of engagement that we have, and use that to inform future decisions.
Thank you. Ian, Chief Data Scientist for New South Wales Government, so we're going to look at some public sector use cases. How might data collection improve client outcomes for out-of-home care and children at risk?
Thanks, Andrew. So I hope most people know that New South Wales has a data analytics centre, the DAC. It shouldn't be a surprise, I hope, to this audience. And over the last 4 years, we've looked at some pretty serious challenges. In fact, we call them wicked policy challenges, so problems that are complex, subtle, and ultimately have people's behaviour at their hearts. Out-of-home care is where children are identified at risk of significant harm, taken away from their families, put into some sort of protective environment, and there are a range of different protective environments. When the DAC started just over 4 years ago, there was a review done that said that there are 22,000 children in New South Wales in out-of-home care. It costs the state $1 billion a year, and the outcomes, the results are really not what we expect. And unfortunately, that's not just true for New South Wales, it's true for many parts of Australia. So over the course of the last 4 years, we've worked on this particular project as well as many others, but this is really the lightning strike, the lightning rod project that we've worked on. Not only demonstrating the power of linking de-identified data sets together to understand that journey of child, family, household, but also reframing the conversation in terms of outcomes as opposed to outputs. What do we actually want to achieve? What does a good outcome look like? What does a bad outcome look like? How do we measure those outcomes? And how do we identify those factors that lead to a positive outcome or an adverse outcome? And it's been really an interesting, not only an interesting way to think about the problem differently, it's been a really interesting way of helping to bring to light a whole lot of assumptions and a whole lot of different ways of viewing complex systems, which historically would be dealt with common sense, or using the abdominal computer, or based on lived experience. And the ability to really bring those issues to light through data and be very explicit about what we mean by a positive or an adverse outcome has been part of the journey that we've been going on as the DAC, but also part of the journey we've been going on as government. And it's also surfaced some really interesting challenges around sensitivities of use of data, often expressed in terms of privacy, but in practice really about the consequences of use, the consequences of understanding, the consequences of knowing. And over the course of the last four years, we've really looked at some of those frameworks that we need to put in place, which take governance to the next step when you link a lot of different data sets together. So we're still on quite a journey, but we are trying to be ambitious about outcomes and trying to be ambitious about the data sets we use with appropriate governance to drive those outcomes.
Thank you. Dayle, what's the keys to a strong data governance strategy, one that enables innovation but also mitigates those risks around data loss?
Yeah, so I think Ian mentioned some of that as well, which is just really being considerate of what use your data is being put to and what you can do with data. But the real key to good data governance is that it is looking at it as a whole of business or whole of system kind of approach. So it's not just the job of the regulatory compliance team or our head of data governance. We've just appointed a new head of data governance to come up with these strategies, and it's not really their responsibility. They just put the guardrails in place. It needs to be a whole of organisation responsibility, so that people understand, one, that people understand what role they play, but two, that we can find the right balanced approach across all of those things. So where is, taking into consideration who has access to what data, the security and privacy around that data, what use we're putting that data to, and then how we're using it for innovation as well, because we don't want to lock everything down so much that we can't innovate and create new opportunities and new ways of solving wicked problems. So it's really working not just with the real key to data governance to me is not just working within a regulatory compliance kind of ecosystem, but looking at the whole of the business, all of the different players in that whole system, and working out how to find that balanced approach across everything. Having really strong data stewardship, so that people people owning and taking responsibility for different parts of data, and then having that really well understood, like a real communications and kind of engagement plan, so that everyone in the organisation really understands it. Going back to that, getting the whole organisation to be a bit more data minded is the key to it, because then as soon as we put any kind of guardrails in place, people get why they're there.
Thank you. Kirk, earlier you talked about cloud being still high on the radar. Spiceworks survey earlier this year indicated that 98% of companies still had on-prem hardware. What's the burning platform for fast-tracking moving your applications to the cloud?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Look, I'm not surprised that most businesses still have something on premise, because the fact of the matter is, even if you try and put everything in the cloud, you still have to connect to it. But I mean, I guess our advice for for data-driven businesses would be that that you take the hybrid IT approach. So if and the hybrid IT approach is you put the data and you put the IT loads where it makes the most sense. So if it makes sense to put it in the cloud, then you put it in the cloud, and maybe it should be public, maybe it should be private. If it makes sense to have it on-prem still, then you put it on-prem, and if it makes sense to have it out on the edge, where you need things and people to interact with it, then that's where you should put it. And yeah, so that would be our advice, hybrid IT.
Thank you. Trisca, international banking environment, how is data used to provide insights for your customers?
Well, let me answer that in two ways, because there's front of house and there's back of house, like I mentioned before. And marketing really plays that front of house role, and then these wonderful people here play more of the back end role, or back of house role. So from a marketing perspective, all organisations use marketing to use data in their marketing across 3 different phases. It's informing what the marketing activity will be, it's analysing when the activity is in market, what's happening, and then it's understanding the impact of that activity at the end of it. So that's very common across all of marketing, and we certainly are no different in institutional. But what you might be interested in is what is happening back of house inside of institutional, which is what my colleagues have been focused on. Because in institutional, we help large organisations transfer and move their goods, services and cash around the region, particularly helping them manage their risk, etc. And in doing that, we gain a lot of extensive data. Think about the transaction banking data, where our customers are spending their money and the transactions that are happening there. So there's a swag of data that has been unlocked. It's been unlocked through very sensitive means, through aggregating the data and de-identifying the data, and that's absolutely critical. And through doing that, we can work with our customers and help provide insights into what their customers are doing. Help them understand, for instance, if you're a fast food organisation, helping you to understand your consumers' behaviour at a geographical level, or if you're an airline, helping you understand what your customers are doing before they get onto the plane, or what are they doing once they leave the plane. And those insights are helping our customers think more deeply about their cash flow, their liquidity, their inventory. It's even helping them to understand, where to open new stores or close stores. So it's really powerful. And what is really exciting is, about a year or so ago, we announced a partnership with a cloud-based analytical provider, where this analysis I've talked about would typically take about 5 days to complete. But since being able to make sure that that data is aggregated, de-identified, and then working with this cloud analytics partner, that 5-day work is now happening in seconds or minutes. So it's really powerful and really exciting.
Thank you. Ian, the National Disability Insurance Scheme gets a lot of press, a lot of high profile. What are some of the data use cases that might improve the effectiveness of the NDIS?
So, to a very real extent, that's an extension of the sort of work that we've been doing with out-of-home care. We joined data across education, health, justice, family community services, Department of Transport, Department of Industry within New South Wales to understand the journey of child, family, household. With the NDIS, we're taking that a step further based on what we've learnt from building these data assets and reframing the conversation in terms of outcomes. So with the NDIS, we will collaborate with not only the Commonwealth and share data across Commonwealth state boundaries, but also with Victoria, with Queensland and with South Australia to start to build a national NDIS data asset to understand what that journey is of people in the NDIS, providers, carers, and again reframe the conversation around outcomes. And that may seem like a simple thing to describe. In fact, it's of course not a simple thing to do. But in terms of describing outcomes, there are many people who've had complex interactions with the NDIS, not really the sort of interaction you'd want. So at the very least, we're looking at points of friction in the system and see what we can do in terms of service redesign or policy redesign to take kinks out of the system to make it less of a complex interaction. But the really powerful thing is not just the efficiency part, as useful as it is, it's the effectiveness part. And effectiveness, described in terms of outcomes, is a really powerful thing to do. It not only puts it out in the open as to what we're actually trying to achieve and allows the debate to be had at a principles level around what the NDIS should achieve, just as with the out-of-home care approach, but it also allows us to have that public debate about whether this is what we should be doing, and then bring it back to a data-driven set of indicators that show whether we're driving those outcomes. And by refreshing this data asset over time not only tells us how to make the system more effective and more efficient, but also whether or not those set of levers we need to pull to drive those outcomes are actually making a difference. So it's actually about fundamental reform of the NDIS, reform of the NDIS to actually deliver on the promise of the scheme and ensure that we really genuinely have a data-driven understanding of how the system actually works.
Thank you. Dayle, we talked about back end. What about the front end? Trust has been another big ticket item in the press. How do you ensure trust with your customers, both consumer and business, in providing personalised, customer-centric services using data?
Yeah, so I think trust, particularly in the Australian culture, trust really has to be earned. AGL is over 182 years old as a company, and there is a trust that customers have in us to provide their energy. Same as banks, there's a trust that people have to provide banking products. But to then think that that trust could extend to how we treat customers' personalised, personal information and data, and banks and energy companies know, there is so much personal information in the way that you transact and the way that you use energy, that to think that that trust that people have, I trust you to provide my electricity, to I trust you with my data, to think that they go hand in hand is a big mistake. So you have to really be thinking about how you earn that trust, how you honour, when people sign a consent, yes, you can have my information, or they agree to, there's the customer business kind of contract that goes together. When people agree to that, then honouring that time and time again, and making sure that people see that you are continuing to honour that trust that they've given you in the first place, and reassessing that every time you have a new product or a new service or a new idea, because everything moves so fast if everything is being directed to your website, to Rome, if everything's being directed to your website, then what you're doing with that, you've got all these trust points time and time and time again to be able to prove that trust or lose it. So always keeping it front of mind, always thinking about the customer and putting yourself in the customer's shoes, or the person whose data that is, putting yourself in their shoes to think about, is that something that they would want you to do? Then the other side of it is the new consumer data rights legislation, and an advisory committee for the energy industry has just been formed, and I sit on that. And what's really interesting in that, it's only just been formed, is that there's, as we go into those meetings, so there's a big wide GitHub where everyone can contribute to what kind of data standards we want to put in place to protect consumers, and they kind of get funneled up into recommendations that come to that committee. What the committee members have been asked to bring to the table is use cases about how businesses might want to use consumer data in business. And we've really been asked to think, there's a spectrum between just compliance with regulations and competing. And we've really been asked to bring those compete use cases to the table so that we can make sure we're thinking about, as businesses think about how they might compete, what the big opportunity in data is for them, making sure that we're getting the right standards in place to protect the consumers every step of the way. So it's great to be able to participate in that, to be able to bring those kind of, thinking about business opportunities, but thinking about those business opportunities through the lens of the consumer and the customer and the person who owns that data every time. And so it's just always thinking about, is this next action I am going to take going to keep that trust with the person whose data this is? Just always keeping that front of mind.
Thank you. Kirk, what's the future of data centre design look like, and how will customers be greater enabled as a result?
Well, definitely with all the data that's being created, I think we're going to see a lot more data centres getting built. But it's also important, when we talk about data centres, it's important to specify what type of data centre we're talking about. So certainly there's the really big end of town, which is the big cloud data centres, the big co-location data centres. But then, then you have special purpose data centres for maybe high performance compute. You still have the enterprise data center. It's not dead. They still build them on site, and of course I talked about the edge before. You have the edge data centers. So as for the future, we predict that big end of town will continue to get bigger and bigger. Here in Australia now, there's 100 megawatt data centers in design, and there's over 1,000 megawatts of data centers in design for the future, just for Australia. But if we look at the edge, I think what the future will be, because a lot of the loads can go into co-location or can go into the cloud, what's left at the edge isn't as much as it used to be before. So I think there'll be a new way of doing things. And I don't know how many people in the room have heard of micro data centers, but a micro data center is where It's like a data center in a box. You can deploy it in a day. It has power, it has cooling, it has monitoring, it has physical security, and you install it and it instantly works. And the best part about it is you don't need a room, so there's no cost to do building works, and that's where we see the future going.
Thank you. Trisca, ANZ's recently launched a series of reports with The Economist, particularly around technology and data use. What have been some of the key insights from those reports?
So this is an example of where we really want to engage with our customers through rich content. And we know that technology is something that all organisations around the world are challenged with, no matter what sector you're with, because technology infiltrates every sector. So with the Economist Intelligence Unit earlier this year, we went out and we surveyed over 750 top executives from the largest organisations around the world in a number of key markets that we're really interested in. And I'm feeling a bit analogue today because I've actually brought a sheet of paper with some of the stats in there because I didn't want to get anything wrong. But essentially, you can go and have a look at the results. Just Google tailored with technology and you'll get the benefit of a swag of material. But let me give you some of the highlights, some of the things that really resonated and stuck out for me. The first thing is, whenever we talk about artificial intelligence and we put articles up around artificial intelligence on social channels with our customers, everyone is going and everyone's looking at it. It seems to be like one of those really top-ranked topics. So when we asked these executives around the world what tech trend is most important to them today, their answer actually surprised me, because 40% of them said that big data and analytics was their driving concern for today, whereas cybersecurity was at 34% and AI was at 31%. So there we go. You've got people on social media talking more about AI, but the world's business leaders are more concerned with data and analytics. And that then ties into, we asked them, well, what are the main challenges today from you as organisations harnessing the technology that you've already got? And the biggest challenge was 41% of responses said it's the complexity of their data that they have. And then we said, well, if that's for today, what about into the future? What's the main challenge that is stopping you from adopting new technology in the future? And 51% said security and privacy, which has come up earlier. So I think this is really interesting because what we're talking about today is absolutely topical for the large businesses all around the world. But then we asked a question that says, why? Why are you investing in emerging technologies? So these are the largest organisations around the world. Now, I don't know about you, but in the circle of marketing, we are constantly talking about customer experience. How do we use technology and data to make that customer experience better? But customer experience was third on the list. Only 25% of organisations around the world are investing in enabling emerging technologies to help improve customer experience. 40% said it's to improve efficiencies. So the key driver for organisations around the world to invest in technology is for internal efficiency gains. I just thought that was really insightful because we are going into an era where we've got slow economic growth around the world. We've got geopolitical challenges. So we need to really understand, I mean, this group, you're the technology geniuses of Australia, you really need to understand where and why organisations are leveraging new technologies. So encourage you to go and just explore tailored with technology and see what other gold nuggets you can pick out of it.
Thank you. Ian, if you were to envision a truly smart city, what are the fundamentals that need to be in place and what would be the impact in terms of livability for our citizens?
So thank you, that's a great question. It's hard to imagine anything more complex than a city. When we think about smart cities, we think about transport and energy networks and telecommunication networks, people movement and a whole range of different issues. But really when we talk about a smart city, what we're talking about is livability accessibility, and sustainability. So really quite different sorts of concepts. So over the last few years, we've been having conversations across Australia about some of these principles-based things that we're trying to achieve. And then when we get down to, well, what do we do about it? How do we find the data sets? How do we build the frameworks? How do we build the indicators? We get a little bit stuck. So there's been some really great work, a call out to Standards Australia and to the Australian Computer Society, trying to link the principles to the bits and actually build frameworks that help us describe the outcomes, again, outcomes that we're looking to achieve in a principles way, deliver indicators or describe indicators which would help really inform those outcomes, and then build the various different frameworks that get us down to the bits level. When you do that, you realise this really is complex, and every problem we've looked at to date, we've linked hundreds or even thousands of data sets together. When we think about a smart city, we're talking about millions of data sets from very diverse sources, covering all of those different domains. So we're still working on this idea. There has been some really, really good work from, again, from different sectors of the communities, from standards and from some university groups and from ACS and peak bodies in the industry. And we're starting to come together to think about how we would frame this challenge and how we would frame it in a way which is meaningful, but ultimately delivers those outcomes, livability, accessibility, sustainability, but really do it in a data-driven way. So this is very much a work in progress and very much a raising of ambition, but also building the frameworks that allow us to do it.
Thank you. Dayle, we covered trust in your last question, so what about tips for preparing a business for autonomous decision making via machine learning and artificial intelligence?
Yeah, I think it's interesting what Trisca was talking about, that executives really think that data and analytics is a bigger problem than maybe AI or customer service, because I think they all come together, so they're also intrinsically tied together, and I maybe wonder whether the executives don't understand the difference between them. But I think it's about doing it incrementally, and each step of the way really engaging with people around the business about what difference it can make, how it might be used, what it means, and what problems we can solve with it to be able to make their parts of the business operate more effectively or unleash new growth opportunities. So an example is that we have, there's one executive at AGL that is just so in love with all of the possibility around machine learning and AI, and he sends me a message saying, "Can you unleash the bots on this thing over here?" And the people that run that part of the business are like, "No, our data quality isn't quite right yet, and the bots will be doing the wrong thing." And so really talking to people through and helping them understand what all of that means, that we don't have bots to unleash, we kind of work with you to build them and work out what we're going to do. And we don't need perfect data to start with, we start with what we have and we grow it from there. So getting people to really understand that we don't need this perfect world order of enterprise data platforms and perfect quality in data and everything to be ready before we turn it on, but actually we build it and grow it, we find the right problems to solve, and we pivot around all of those to make them happen. So that the big part about getting businesses ready for this is getting them engaged and getting them thinking about how data can be used to solve their problems, and getting people not to be scared of it. So I think, the term big data has been around for years and years and years, and people, there's lots of consulting companies out there going, "I can solve your big data problems, I can help you make this, make your organisation successful with this," but really getting people to understand what that means and what that opportunity is and how it's sitting there waiting to be used in organisations. So, energy companies we have so much data that comes from smart meters, we have so much data that comes from, customers' interactions with us, we have so much data around, our power generation sites, we have millions of sensors out on plant and equipment for asset maintenance. And so and then there's weather data and what's going to happen next, is it going to be a hot day or a cold day? All of that is kind of milling around in an energy company that is just sitting there waiting to be, used to create differences and points of difference for our business. So really helping, making that not just the job of the front end or the back end or the tech team or the data scientist, but making it the something that the whole organisation thinks about, but then incrementally just stepping into really making it work and showing the value from each little use case we go after.
Thank you. Kirk, Vertiv published a list of 2019 top 5 data centre trends. You mentioned the edge before. The edge driving change was one of those top 5. What does that look like in practice?
Yeah, so talking about the edge a little bit more, just to elaborate on what I've said earlier, because we're expecting an explosion in edge, and in the global survey that we did, where we surveyed over 800 people globally from this industry, over 50% of them said that they expect that the number of edge sites they're going to have will increase by 200% by 2025. A smaller group said that the number of edge sites will increase by 400%, and there was even a group that said by 1,000%. So there's going to be this explosion, and the edge isn't new; it's always been there. But I think the way that we need to approach the edge is different now. You can't just throw a network switch under a table or in a closet. You need to think about how you can do it better, and that's where the change is going to come from. So we're seeing the equipment that you put out on the edge has to be a lot smarter. If it's smarter, then you can get better insights from it, and then you can start. You can predict when it may fail, and you can go out early to make sure it doesn't fail. Certainly, we're expecting that a lot of change will happen with the UPS technologies and the battery technologies, where instead of just backing up the loads, they'll get increased features where they'll have grid connectivity, and you have the ability to do peak lopping and load management. And of course, thermally, the edge and finding that ideal thermal solution for the edge. How do you cool everything? It's going to drive a lot of new technologies in thermal technologies as well.
Thank you. Trisca, what about from a macro level, across all your customers, which industries do you think are doing the data-driven approach best?
I think it's hard to talk about industries as a collective because some are at individual organisations are at different levels of maturity within a category. So maybe I'll just talk to a couple of organisations that I think are doing some pretty incredible things. The first one is something that is personally really has caught my attention and has really captured my imagination. It's because I personally have a passion in adventures, I have a passion in hiking and travelling, and this organisation is not just about how to get you from A to B, it's actually about how to really make you immersive in the experience you're going to have once you get to B. So what I'm talking about is an iconic part of Melbourne. It's the Spirit of Tasmania. And as you wind your way around the Port of Melbourne, you will all eventually see, if you're there at the right time of the day, this big red and white boat. Now, it's a boat. It gets us across some 3 tough seas that all merge into one to an amazing destination called Tasmania. And what they have done is they have segmented their customer base to really know and understand what really attracts people to get to Tasmania. And they've looked at that and said, well, let's make this immersive. Let's use our understanding of customers' preferences, whether it be you're into your wine and your food, you're a thrill seeker, you're a hiker like me, or you're into, something else. And as a result of that, they then serve really rich content to me about the areas that I'm most interested and passionate about. So that over time, with a consistent messaging to me about content that I'm really engaged with, over time has made me fall in love more and more with the Spirit of Tasmania as a brand. And I can't wait to take my family back there in January for some more adventures. But that's a personal story. But let me tell you about another organisation that isn't Australia-based, but they're doing some amazing things. So this is an organisation that started over 21 years ago as an apparel organisation. They were one of the first to come up with those sort of moisture wicking t-shirts so that when you sweat you didn't sort of hold the moisture and the smell in the fabric. That was 21 years ago. Today, they are the world's largest fitness community What they did is they went out and they spent a few $100 million a few years ago to actually buy some apps that engage people about their health and fitness. So we're talking about apps such as MyFitnessPal, Endomondo, Maps Fitness Me, I think it is. So these are apps that as consumers you would go in, or just as everyday people you go in and you record your sleep, what you eat, the exercise goals you have, when and how you exercise. And what is really interesting is I actually used one of those apps for many, many years, and I kept on seeing this logo at the bottom of it. And then I started seeing that logo on my kids' t-shirts and on people around the streets. And I went, why are they wearing MyFitnessPal's logo? Only to realise it was the other way around. So the organisation I'm talking about is Under Armour. So you'll know it as the U and the N. So this organisation, we know it today predominantly as an apparel organisation. But they are leaders in understanding all the data around people who want to, focus on their health and fitness. They know how you're sleeping, what you're exercising, what you're eating, and they're using that to design physical apparel, shoes, that then will help you become better runners because they're recording all the data, they're giving you instant advice through their apps on how to change your stride and your speed so you're improving your performance. They're looking at sleep and how sleep is improving performance. You can put into some of their apps information about your goals. They'll set you a training program and then real-time monitor how you're going and give you feedback on what to change and what to do. I mean, this is merging online and offline in a whole new way because they're changing their actual physical products and what they're selling to you based on the data that they have and ultimately to make you a better performer. So I just think that's really quite an amazing story.
Thank you. Ian, for effective data use in public service provision, is a unique identifier per citizen a prerequisite? Not a loaded question.
Absolutely not. So we've been building data assets that help us understand the journey of child, family, household, business, property for analytical purposes. When we operationalise those insights, build services, then it's actually more important for each and every one of us to have one view of government as opposed to one view of citizen. So New South Wales has been building the access to Service New South Wales based on one view of government and wrapping services around you as opposed to one view of you, one view of us. And that twisting around or that reshaping or pivoting of thinking has been very, very useful.
Thank you. We've got 7 minutes left. The app has been the biggest one rather than social, so I'm going to throw to some questions from the audience right now. This one's from Brendan Charles to Dayle and Trisca. Are we finally turning the corner in terms of more diversity and inclusion in ICT? Do new fields of data and cyber offer more opportunities for women in IT?
Well, I'll just say first of all, because I'm actually more marketing, we have the opposite problem in marketing to what we have in ICT. In marketing, we have predominantly females. So I'm constantly looking for diversity by having more males. So what's been wonderful from a marketing professional perspective is as soon as we started moving into digital marketing, where we're looking at marketing technologies, we finally got the males into the teams. But it's still very much marketing technology dominant. So I just wonder, my question to everyone here is, how can we do the reverse? Because there's a lot of skills in marketing where it is traditionally a female-dominated sector. Where can we take those skills and attract them into ICT? Because I really do think that there's a lot of synergies going that way.
So I have worked in the technology industry for nearly 30 years, and I would argue there's always been amazing opportunities for women and any kind of background, any kind of diversity in technology. I think, and if you go back in time, there were a lot of women working in our space, but we've got a bad reputation, and there's some over the last number of years, and not so much a bad reputation, but more myths have kind of built up that it is an male-centered industry to be in. I think what's great and what's happening much more now is that those myths are being busted, and we're seeing a lot more a lot more information being shared about what kind of roles there are in IT and in data, and we're seeing a lot more people speaking from different backgrounds and talking about how much those diverse voices and diverse backgrounds make a big difference in the kind of things that we, the products we produce and the things that we sell. So I think, there's always been great opportunities. I think opening the doors and sharing a whole lot more about what those opportunities are is what's changing.
Thank you. Benjamin Hall, open question, so anyone who wants to jump in. The Australian Government's State of the Service report released last week stated 77.3% of departments attribute legacy systems and 73% lack of skills to use data effectively to create an end-to-end transactional experience. How are your organisations with similar scenarios combating this?
I can have a go at that one. So, I feel incredibly privileged to work in an organisation, to work at AGL, where we have invested significantly over the last 5 years in our platforms, the digital transformation, the cloud migration, all of those things that people talk about and dream of. We've done that, so we are in a great position now to be able to kind of leap into this future. And I know that it's really hard in from IT to be talking to, trying to get the investment and try to get the funding to get, the more business side of organisations to understand the importance of this investment. So I'm incredibly lucky to be in an organisation where we've got that and we've done that, and now we're kind of leaping into the future. But keep trying, keep working at that, getting those legacy systems retired and leaping into the future, because it's made such a huge difference for us.
Any other comments on that one?
I'd say just going back to that economic intelligence report, where we asked that question of executives around the world that said, what's stopping you from really harnessing technology? And legacy systems came in fourth. 31% did say that legacy systems were holding them back, but again, it was that security and privacy that was the main issue. But at ANZ Institutional, like every other bank, of course, we've got lots of technology, lots of data, and we're really solving that by putting the customer first and thinking about how can we create an elegant experience, decommission the technology we don't need anymore, while we need to use some of the legacy technologies, of course, but how do we create an overlay that is far more user-friendly, and so the customer doesn't have to face into the legacy systems, our back end does, but we can give the customer a really elegant front-end experience.
Thank you. Ian, I've got lots of data-related questions here for you, but I think we can round them out in one final question, and that's today you're launching a new report. Would you like to share what the findings are and recommendations contained in that report are?
Thank you, Andrew. It's a beautiful read at 121 pages, so if you have any trouble sleeping tonight, just have a read of this. The problem is essentially around the projects that I described. The challenge is that as you start to link de-identified data sets together, there is a view held by most people, many people, that eventually you'll take this de-identified data and produce personally identifiable information. And this is a problem, as it turns out, everywhere around the world. Personal information, eye colour, hair colour, shoe size, eventually link, there must be personally identifiable information. And as a real world challenge, this is something that happened with our out-of-home care project, where the New South Wales Privacy Commissioner said, we have to stop the project. You surely have personally identifiable information in your linked de-identified data sets. So over the course of the last 3 years, we've been looking at developing a personal information factor, so we can tell how much personal information we've got, trying to identify thresholds for personally identifiable information, and more broadly looking at the challenges of data sharing and use, which really speak to those sensitivities. So voice concerns, typically privacy, personal information, and legislative barriers that are put up because of that personal information, but in practice, the unvoiced concerns around sensitivity of the data itself, sensitivity around use. So today we've put out something which is helping to inform an international standard in this space through what's called JTC1, and what we're trying to do is produce some how-to guides to understand that personal information dimension, but also the sensitivity dimension.
Thank you so much. And do we have copies available?
I believe we have 200 copies of 198 197 copies are available now.
Fantastic, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, if we could please thank Dayle Stephens, Kirk Wetherell, Trisca Scott-Branagan and Dr. Ian Oppermann.